Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Jeremy Simon with 3D Universe, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to this episode of 3D Universe Untethered. This is episode 4. Today's topic is how 350 makers with 600 3D printers created 66,000 PPE in 6 months through Portland's MakerForce. So I'm really looking forward to this. As many of you with 3D printers, I've been very much involved in this effort to help produce PPE, and this is a great story that I look forward to hearing more about. I want to invite those who are listening in to use the Q&A panel throughout this session. Feel free to ask questions, and we'll be sure to get to those either during our discussion or towards the end. But please do share your thoughts and questions using that Q&A panel whenever you like. With that, I am going to go ahead and introduce our speakers for today. So I want to invite my co-host, Jen Owen, and as well as our speakers, Shashi, Jain, and Connor Weller, to go ahead and turn on your video and audio. Join me on screen here. So most of you know Jen by now. Jen is creative director with 3D Universe. She's also co-founder of the eNable volunteer community, which we'll hear some more about today. It's relevant to our discussion. And we also have today Shashi Jain. Shashi is a co-founder of MakerForce. His day job is strategic innovation manager at Intel, where he builds new products and internal startups in the areas of IoT, that's Internet of Things, machine learning, and 3D printing. Shashi brings a diverse skill set and 20 years of experience in business development, engineering, integration, rapid prototyping, and community building to his work. Shashi gives back to the community as Global Education Director for Thai Young Entrepreneurs Oregon, a program that teaches entrepreneurship skills and innovation methods to high school students. He's an early member of the Enable community, delivering 3D printed prosthetic limbs, and currently works with Eagle Scouts on growing access to this technology. Shashi is also the founder of the Portland 3D Printing Lab, a community of over 2,000 3D printing enthusiasts in Portland, Oregon. Glad you could join us, Shashi. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. We also have Connor Weller with us today. Connor is a co-founder of MakerForce, nonprofit organization started to fight the global PPE crisis. To this date, MakerForce has produced well over 60,000 pieces of PPE. Connor is a college student and a small business owner who sells Washington State University themed products through his website at, help me out with the pronunciation here, is it Kougkie?
Kougkie.
Kougkie, COUGKIE.com, and is in the process of developing new products under his brand BaselineDesign, which is BaselineDesign.co, that will serve a much larger audience. The experience he gained 3D printing products in mass for these businesses proved extremely helpful when it came to organizing others to form MakerForce. Connor, welcome. Glad you could join us.
Thank you.
So with that, we'll go ahead and get our discussion started. Jen, you want to start us off here?
Yeah, it's great to have you guys with us today. Thank you for joining us. First of all, I would really like to ask both of you how you got started in 3D printing in the first place. So Shashi, you want to go first?
Yeah, certainly. So I had gotten into 3D printing. I'd been aware of it since like the early 2000s. I was just starting my career at Intel. I was in this little internal startup that was making, something with like an amazing screen and, Wi-Fi and a 3G radio. It sounded like an iPhone, but it was like many years before there was an iPhone. A little too early and whatnot. But what's amazing is that we would build these devices and we would turn them around in a few days. And I came to know that 3D printing was used to make the shells for these things. And I got to know a lot more about that process. I was super fascinated by it. And I learned that it's actually a fairly old technology for rapid prototyping, having been started in the early 80s. And then fast forward a few years later, I had left Intel for a short amount of time. And I was looking to start a business, and I remembered 3D printing, and I was like, I'm going to do something with 3D printing. I'm not sure what it is, and it kind of ballooned into what it is today. So that's how I got started.
That's awesome. Connor?
Yeah, so I've been interested in 3D printing ever since I learned about it, but I started working with it when I moved to Eugene, Oregon, I joined one of the makerspaces there. I believe it's Eugene Makerspace, and they had a MakerBot cupcake that, not the best prints, not the fastest prints, but it was cool. That was the first time I was actually got to see a 3D printer, and I just go and I pull files off Thingiverse, and I'd hit print and I just watch it. That first phase when you start 3D printing, you just can't get enough of it. It doesn't matter what you're printing as long as you're printing something. So that's where it first started, and I think that was like 7th grade for me. Yeah. And then when I moved again to Vancouver, Washington, and my new high school, Skyview High School, had a 3D printer, and again I was just fascinated with it. It's a 3D printer. This is crazy. My school has one, so I just kind of ran with that, and I learned to design through high school, and was able to use the 3D printer to make different tools and devices. And then my junior year of high school, I bought a Delta style 3D printer for like $300. It was garbage, but I got to print, and I got to print well enough that I was able to get on 3D hubs, get some profit back from it, and then I eventually bought a Prusa Mark II, and it was like it was a really big accomplishment for me because I had the professional 3D printer, and I continued using that one on 3D hubs and through other different places to try and make a profit off it. And then my freshman year of college, I had that same Prusa printer, and I made this WSU cookie cutter for my mom, and she apparently loved it, and she shared it to one of the WSU Facebook groups, and they all loved it. So I started getting a bunch of requests for it, buy some more printers to keep up with it, and I've just kind of been, I've run this little print farm and using it to produce different products since then. It's been a ton of fun.
That's cool.
Nice. So yeah, both of you clearly are veterans of 3D printing, and as we all know, there's a lot you can do with these machines. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that next. What are some of the kinds of things that you guys have both done with 3D printing? What are some of the projects that you've done that maybe kind of led you to what you're involved in now? Maybe again, starting with you, Shashi.
Sure, certainly. I think everyone has gone through their phases of printing trinkets and vases and things like that. That's largely how I got started. For me, it was making little TARDISes. That I had a whole drawer full of those at one time, and I actually started with stereolithography printing, and then got my first MakerBot, which turned into the second, which eventually led to having 14 printers in the house. So what do you do with those things? Well, I was also on 3D hubs like Connor was, and doing engineering prints for local startups and teaching other startups how to use 3D printing. But I'm really most proud of the things that we did with as a Portland 3D printing labs. As you mentioned, I run a community of 2,000 enthusiasts here in Portland. Shout out to some of them. I see them in the audience here. And over the years, we've done group projects together. Some of them, just seeing if we could, like one time we built one side of like half of a cow. It was 4 feet tall, 8 feet long, and it was 100 pieces that we stitched together. And we really learned how to build big models. Sometimes we do art pieces, like we were in the Portland Art Museum where we were building art exhibits that could be companions to ones that are already in the museum, but they could be touched and they could be carried around by patrons. So it gave people like a tactile feeling of what could be done with art. And then, I've also worked with a local fashion tech accelerator called Fashion Next on, helping look at the intersection of Internet of Things and fashion and 3D printing. So as an example, we had brought in a company called Feet that was 3D printing shoes. And we were looking at embedding 3D prints in materials. So just a wide variety of those types of projects. Besides MakerForce, which is probably the biggest thing that we've done, what's on my printers right now is actually rockets. So I have a 3D printer that can print 6 feet tall, and I'm printing SpaceX and Blue Origin and all kinds of things just because.
That's
That's
awesome.
so cool.
Terrific. How about you, Connor?
Sorry, what was that question again? I got a
Just kinds of projects you've been involved with in 3D printing. What kinds of things have you done that led you to what you're involved with now?
yeah. So I mean, first, in high school I was in first robotics, and that completely changed my life. I'm so grateful for that program. And through that program, I learned how to CAD, how to design, and all that different things. And I kind of learned how to use 3D printing as a tool for making very specific parts, and then how to design for it, because there's certain characteristics you have to keep in mind when 3D printing. You have to have certain overhangs, you have to have so much bed area. If you're using the support material, there's certain ways to use it where it makes it easy to use. Layer lines, all that kind of stuff. So I kind of learned how to design for 3D printing in high school. And then later on, when I started my cookie cutter business, I got kind of the production feel of 3D printing. At the time when I first started, I had my one Prusa 3D printer sitting on my cabinet in my dorm room and running nonstop, trying to keep up, and I ended up getting some more printers for that. And churning out parts on those machines was very much like what we were all doing for making the actual face shield. If you're printing a PETG, there's certain things you need to do if you're printing en masse that way you don't ruin your bed, stuff like that. So kind of designing for that and how to run it in mass really, really tied into MakerForce and allowed that to work.
Excellent.
That's really cool. Shashi, I have had the privilege of visiting your Portland Maker Lab back, when Enable first started. You invited me down, and I believe I got to see the cow. How did you found that? How did you just decide to start this group?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And Jen, that was what, 2015, I think?
I think so.
Right when Enable started.
Yeah.
So, I had mentioned that I got into 3D printing when I built my own 3D printing startup. It's called Matter Compilers. And for any geeks out there, science fiction geeks, that's straight out of Neil Stephenson and the Diamond Age. But what I'd noticed is when I was talking about 3D printing to people, when I was talking about the business, they would get really excited. They'd be like, well, you're doing, this is something really cool. Is there any community or any places where we can go and do this? And, there were some maker spaces around, and I was going to all these different places like Internet of Things groups, startup groups, all this stuff. And I would talk to 2 or 3 people at every one of them. So I was like, oh, you know what, why don't we do our own meetup? And this was in December of 13. So it's been a while. And when I noticed, when I put the meetup out there, I was like, okay, we'll get 20 people, and maybe we'll have a good time, have some pizza or something. And within the first few hours, we had maybe first few days, we had 100 people sign up. Wow. And by the time we had our first meetup on the books in January 2014, there was a couple hundred people, and 120 of them showed up on that first meetup. It was amazing. And so we established, we'd have networking, speakers, then networking. And we would talk about what's state of the art in that month, what's happening, what are interesting projects that were happening in our community. And then the discussion came to, instead of just talking about 3D printing, we were like, what can we do as a group? What are the projects? Hence those things I was talking about before. That how do we get the whole group working on projects? So that put us in a really good position as a community to be able to respond to the PPE pandemic, as I'll talk about in a bit. But it really came together out of this geeky love of 3D printing and a technology that was really nascent at the time.
That's really cool. Connor, how did you and Shashi meet? Were you part of the Portland 3D printing lab, or did you just kind of run into each other somehow?
So it was through the Portland 3D printing lab, but I didn't really participate too much with the group. I joined the Facebook group. That was mostly so I could answer some questions if any had them, or track down parts if something broke, that kind of stuff. Be part of the community. That way, if anything happens, I'm good. But by the time I joined the group, I was kind of out of my like tinkering phase with 3D printing, and at that point, I was just using 3D printing as a tool. It's, I don't want to try and add things to the printer, change stuff out, or do whatever. It was just it's a tool to make something else. So I wasn't so much working with the rip-wrap stuff or really anything else like that. If I had something that worked, that's enough for me. And then when the pandemic hit, I remember seeing a post on either like Facebook or Reddit. I can't remember where exactly, but it was someone in Portland asking for help making face shields for his wife at hospital in Portland. And I'm like, oh, okay, I can help with this, but I need more people. So I posted in the Facebook group, and I was looking for printers in the area to help print out, and people said, yeah, I'll help out. And I remember as I was like packing up all the stuff to drive over and drop it off at their house, Shashi called me. That was the first time we've ever talked. While I was dropping off the first order, and we've been super close since then, working together on this project, and it's been fantastic. I'm so glad I was able to meet Shashi. I'm sad we didn't meet sooner though, because it would have been way more fun.
Yeah, without a doubt. Just to add to that, if we're thinking about that, how MakerForce came about, Connor built, he reached out to the group, and I had been, when the pandemic hit, I was actually working out of California, even though I'm based in Oregon, and we were sent home from California. They were like, this thing is bad, you need to pack up and just go home. And that was on the 15th of March. So that was, that same day, people in the group started asking us, well, what are we going to do about this? We keep hearing about doctors needing PPE and things like that. And I was like, no, man, we can't make medical devices. What are you talking about? This is not the way the world works. And then, we started hearing through my startup network that doctors were actually asking for this, and hospital administrators too. And we started, when Connor and I spoke, we learned that, there was places in Europe that were making approved 3D printed PPE. So, I put out the call to the 3D printing lab, let's do this. And we have when I said we 3D printed a cow and we 3D printed art things, we did this with a system based on Google Sheets to organize all the makers and get them up and running. So I set that up, and that's about the time when I called Connor, and he had set up a GoFundMe, and we got together and kind of joined forces to go and build things and make a system that made it dead simple for others to join us.
Oh yeah, and that system that they had already was incredibly helpful. We wouldn't be able to do a fraction of what we did without that system, because we only have so many like administrators in the organization to try and process requests coming in and then designate them to different people to print and drop off and all that stuff. That whole sheet kind of automated the system and made it where one person could drop in an order, and hundreds of people could come in, claim them, and make the parts. And it really, really decreased the administrative load of the organization. So without that, it would have been impossible.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, that kind of goes back to the origins, which I wanted to talk a little bit more about, because when this COVID thing came into our lives, I think we quickly saw people looking at what they could do with their 3D printers, especially once we started to see these shortages of PPE. And so people, all over started kind of getting involved in that. But your group seems to have been one of the first and able to kind of most rapidly scale up and start having an impact. It sounds to me from what you're saying, like a lot of that is because you sort of already had this group in place. You already had some of these tools. You were able to build on kind of what you already had in place. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, in a sense. We used the same tools initially on the Google Sheet, and then we eventually moved over to Airtable to scale it up even further. Hey, Connor, do you remember those days when we had 100 people on the Google Sheet simultaneously, and Google was
Oh
like,
my
"Hey,
God.
there's too many editors on this thing. You guys."
I had no idea you could do that. I didn't know there was a maximum to Google Sheets, but apparently there's a limit on how many like concurrent users you can have.
Yeah,
I still think that's crazy that we somehow reached the limit like that.
yeah. What we learned early on, though, is we needed to be more systematic about things, and our makers wanted to focus on making, and we had volunteers who were great at the account management and the fulfillment side of things. So what we ended up creating was, in effect, a pop-up supply chain that allowed the makers to be laser focused on the things that they do best: laser cutting, mostly 3D printing, also sewn masks. And we had the practice, yes, making art projects, but there was purpose in doing it, doing PPE. We had we could tell the stories of our makers all day long. Like there's one, John Light Powell, he's in that danger zone of PP for COVID, and when he was looking for ways to help during the pandemic, being set at home, he found MakerForce, and he started volunteering his 3D printers, much like in the days of Enable. That's what was happening, but he couldn't go out, frequently. So we gave the makers a way to make and then drop everything off at a single drop off point, and we would take care of everything else. So we minimize the danger. So, but yeah, it really did build on on the art projects and made it practical.
Yeah, we really took advantage of like, beginning of the pandemic when it first hit the U.S., everyone wanted to help in some way. It doesn't matter who you were across every discipline, everyone wanted to help. And we act as a way to enable that. If you had a 3D printer, great, print out these parts. If you have a laser, great, cut out these parts. If you want to help out with administration, great, join the group. We've got so many different roles we could have you fill in and help us organize and reach out to other organizations and so on. We reached out to different organizations and see if they checked if they want to help. We reached out to robotics teams, local maker spaces, and said, "Hey, we need these things. Can you do this for us?" And we work with them. And it was just incredible to see just how willing people were to help. Everyone wanted to do something, and it was just made it so easy. It's not like you're trying to rope people into something that's back of mind. Everyone was thinking about the pandemic, so when you give them a way to help, people jump at it.
Yeah, it's very similar to what we've seen with the Enable community, seeing people all over the place wanting to do something to help others out. And there's this great technology emerging that's letting us do that in new and very powerful ways. And I love what I'm seeing here. You've got the same situation where you have people wanting to do something meaningful. You've got the internet allowing us to connect with each other and collaborate. You've got 3D printing that allows us to rapidly prototype and produce these things. And you're bringing an interesting new element with something like Airtable, which is a very powerful platform that allows you to essentially build pretty robust software without having to do any coding. There's really a powerful combination here of being able to very quickly spin up this new organization and workflow that's been able to have a real impact.
Totally, yeah. Just kind of add to that a little bit. The shared information through the internet was extremely helpful. Most of our designs weren't designed in the US. We were printing parts designed in the Czech Republic, parts designed in Sweden. That open source community of I made this, here, everyone use it, was just incredible. We had such a large list of ideas to pull from. And I think in the beginning we had a whole list of the different things people could have. It got so long that we had to cut it down and narrow it because people were getting confused. Like, oh, there's like 80 different designs. Which one do I want? So like that would not have been possible. I mean, I could have probably designed something, but it's hard to push it through all the different administrative testing and certifications and all that kind of stuff. So when one small group was able to do that and then make it available to everyone, that helped the entire world. It was incredible.
Yeah, it was interesting to see just in a matter of a week how you could get a design out there and it would get shared in all the maker communities, and then there would be 4 or 5 upgrades and reshares, and there was just this within a week, the makers of the world were just on it, and it was just awesome. Do you guys have any stories that you can share about some of your recipients, some of the hospitals or the healthcare heroes or anything that you've delivered to?
Shashi probably has most of those. I'm over in Vancouver and he's in Portland, so I'm a little ways away. So I spent most of my time just administrating through the computer. A lot of the,
He's being really humble. He's our head of R&D, so some of those designs that are being made by him. So you should tell the story of the mask and how that came about, Connor, and then I'll tell a story of the people who are receiving PPE.
Yeah. So I think the mask started when Shashi, you looked me into an email chain between a few doctors that were trying to find mask alternatives. So at the time, a lot of hospitals didn't have access to N95s and the other PPE that they needed. Face shields were easy, piece of plastic, but a mask is something different entirely, and it's got to be very specific, otherwise it won't work. And they tested some of the 3D printed designs people had made. There was the Billings mask, I think another mask called Montana mask, which is similar, but it's confusing. And they weren't really a fan of them. The plastic was hard to clean, hard to sterilize. It was semi-porous, so they were worried about air getting through. It was hard to produce a seal. Just had all these different issues that they weren't super happy about.
One thing to add to this is that the designs were often made for men. They were scanned based on scans for men. So one of the doctors that we had worked with, Lakshmi, she had said she couldn't get a seal on the, because it was designed for a wider face and a wider nose as well. And there were no ways to fix that without individually scanning. So that was one of the reasons why I brought Connor in to that discussion.
Yeah. And, that plastic is tough. It's a solid piece of plastic. So without, thermoforming it afterwards, it's a very narrow range of people. So I kind of talked to them for a little bit, trying to figure out what the problems were, what they need, because I'm a student. I don't really know much about the whole medical discipline. So working with them was perfect. After working with them for a while, I started developing a silicone mask. That's the structure of it was made entirely of silicone that could be cast in a 3D printed mold. So the thought was it's something you could create very quickly. Each mask takes about 20 minutes to make. So it's super quick, faster than 3D printing. It's pretty affordable. I think only a few bucks per mask. And anyone can make it, anyone can print out the parts and, make their masks. I had someone out in the Cayman Islands that was printing these and making them for the people on the island, because they got quarantined there and they weren't able to get shipments in. So it was hard to get PPE because, the entire world needed it. But he was able to make these masks, which was, I still think it's one of the coolest things. I got pictures of my molds sitting on a beach. It's super cool.
Cool.
So after working with them for a while, I kind of came to, I think I'm on version 3 now. I think that's what it is. And it's open source design. You can access it on my website, which I have one here. So this is what it looks like, and it's just simple silicone. This is something anyone can make. I've got whole tutorials on how to make it, and the goal is just try to provide a different option, because masks were and still are super important, and I wanted to provide something better than just a cloth mask. Something that you would use with a patient who has COVID-19. So working with that team, they were able to test it, go through different trials, and they're still in the process of testing it. So I'm really proud of it.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff. And how this relates to your question, Jen, is those two people who he's working with were our first 2 recipients. So they were, we could talk about recipients all day, but the very first one that struck me was delivering masks to the Portland VA. And they were in desperate need of, it was not masks, but face shields. They were in desperate need at that time. And this was maybe in the last week of March where we delivered our first set to them. And it took us about a week and a half or so to muster that first 50. And then they put us in touch with others. And pretty soon we had an order for 1,000 in from Legacy Health, individually wrapped masks. And that was our first major operation.
God, I remember that.
we were hearing from all these legacy systems, you can't even imagine what it's like, or maybe you can, to have doctors and nurses calling you up crying because they've given away their last PPE and they have nothing. And they're like, well, can you do something for us now? And we're like, yeah, we'll get to it. We'll do it as fast as we can. And that provided the motivation. We would tell these stories in the group that here's a doctor. When in the GoFundMe, a parent wrote us and said, my daughter's in Texas. She has no PPE. Here's I'm going to put in some extra funding. Could you just get her something? And so we were like, it's not for sale. Just get us the name and we'll send it out as fast as we can. And there's lots of stories like that. You know, there was a story that was circulating in Intel about MakerForce, and one person saw it, and she reached out and said, my daughter's at the NICU at St. V's, Providence St. V's, which is St. Vincent's, which is a local hospital, and she's going in without PPE because they're not critical need. And it's like, these are babies, you know, you got people who are caring for babies, you got to protect them. So we were fortunate enough to be able to fill that gap. But we heard this story over and over. Pharmacists, assisted living workers, just all of these people who had not been prioritized for PPE, placing orders with us. So we covered them the best we could. And, I think what we're most proud of is being able to serve the underserved communities. For sure, we've been working with a lot of homeless shelters and nursing homes, elderly care, even in the hotspots in New Jersey. We got a call from a nursing home there, a veterans home, who said that they have PPE, they don't have enough, and they're a hot zone. Can we get us any? Can we send anything? So we were in the middle of a shortage of one of the materials, so we called up our partners in the area. They supplied a little, we supplied a little, and we were able to get them what they needed. But there was a sense of desperation and a very palpable sense of danger in all of this. Yeah,
it was something that just kept driving us. I kind of said jokingly to Shashi that it's, we're not making teddy bears, we're making medical devices to help, save people's lives.
Yeah, so we said this to our makers, you keep making, because every device, everything you put you can use your hobby to protect a person. Every one of these things is a person protected. So keep them going.
Absolutely. Yeah, just that idea that if I don't make this one thing and get it out, then that's one person out there who's left unprotected. At the time, we didn't know how dangerous COVID was, and what the risks were. We just know that these heroes were going to work every day and dealing with people exclusively who had COVID-19 and putting their lives at risk. And I'm stuck here in my comfy house and I'm not going out. I don't have to go out. So whatever I could do to help them, I will.
Yeah. And like you said, each one piece of PPE that you make can help to save a life. But that kind of leads into the next question I have, which is, there are some costs associated with this. There's materials that go into this, and especially when, like you guys were talking about, thousands and thousands of pieces of PPE, those costs add up. How have you guys handled that? How have you handled, fundraising or, funding this important effort?
Connor, you want to talk about the GoFundMe, and I'll talk about in-kind donations.
Yeah. So the GoFundMe started early on. I can't remember exactly. I think it was a few days after we actually started delivering PPE. Because it's like, oh wait, we're not going to be able to afford this. Great. And that was extremely helpful. I think, Shashi, are we up to 14,000 now?
A little over 15,000. Yeah, we put out the call in our networks for funding, and we'd write about what specifically things the funding would be used for. Largely, that's turned into shipping for the PPE. When a request comes in on the website, it's we don't ask for funding. It's completely free. You're right, though. Materials do cost. Filament for 3D printers, clear plastic for shields, even elastics. They all add up. So we have a few funding sources, primarily GoFundMe is one. The in-kind part is through donations, and we've asked for elastic donations before, and the community responded. Oh my God! In a time when people were making the the sewn masks, and they were, Joanne was out of all of the elastics that you could think of. Some of the thicker ones we were able to use, and we received community donations. I think we can measure it in kilograms. I think there was like 12 to 15 kilograms of elastic, and that's a lot of elastic for.
Oh yeah, it was crazy to see it.
We literally just recently ran out of that. And then we found through a source on the East Coast a place to get really inexpensive elastic. So we bought as much as we could of that. For filament, our makers donated very generously out of their own stashes and stockpiles. There was a time when we didn't have anything to give them, and they just kept producing parts. It didn't matter that they were donating out of their own. We estimate that maybe 5 spools of filament per maker, partial spools, were just donated like that. And then maybe, go ahead.
The thing too with that is everyone who 3D prints and is 3D printing for a while has like a half-empty spool somewhere that they don't use. So this gave them a way to just use up that material laying around. It was kind of nice to just clear out all those almost finished spools, but still enough left. Yeah. So we'd get a few parts in that were like 4 different colors because it was like the ends of 4 spools.
Yeah. In those early days, when we weren't sure, when retail businesses would be open again, Protoplant actually went back to work and made protopasta for us, to our specifications. And we got almost 40 kilograms of that and distributed out. It took maybe 2 weeks to distribute all that out. So we also got donations from other groups of filament, of visor material, which is the clear part. The visor material stuff is the stuff of legends. I'm telling you, we got donations from Coca-Cola. So they heard that we were doing this, and they were like, "Can you use this plastic?" And it's the same material that Coke bottles are made out of, the plastic ones. We're like, "Yeah, absolutely, we could." A week later, like 1,000-pound roll of this stuff is in our makerspace, and we're cutting it up and we're sending it all over the Northwest. And this was an introduction made by the Open Source Medical Supplies Group, which has been amazing partners. But that's good. Every time we have a corporate sponsor or partner like this is what happens. You need this? No problem. We'll get it out to you.
Shashi, really quick, just to put that roll in perspective, that roll was about as tall as I am, so just a hair below 6 foot, and as wide as it was tall. It was giant. It was crazy. But I first saw it,
and we're still going through it.
We're going to use all that.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And so the other thing I'm wondering about is how you guys have gone about connecting with the people most in need for the PPE. Was it mostly about sort of setting up a website and getting the word out and having people come to you, or were you doing some kind of active outreach, or how's that connection happened?
Part of that was just good media coverage. You say we're a group of 3D printers that are making PPE for hospitals, and everyone wants to do a story on it. So I think we had 20-something like video news stories that were done on it. So that helped a lot for helping raise funds and make people aware that, hey, we exist. If you need help, let us know and we can help you. We had a website early on so people could go and request, and that helped a lot because word would kind of spread. It was easy to share. And then those who needed help just had to reach out, fill out a small form on the website, and we'll reach out and help out where we can.
Yeah, just to build on that, when they reached out, instead of finding just a Google form, they saw a full catalog of pre-vetted parts and who had done the vetting. So that also, there's an assurance that people got from seeing that we were giving them things that they could rely on. Certainly media coverage. We had partner organizations like OSMS and getusppe.org that have been, crucially helpful, particularly finding smaller groups that have been overlooked. Get Us PPE just funneled people into our system regionally. And these are people who would ask us for, can I have 6 face shields to cover my, just my staff? We're like, well, are you asking for enough? Don't you need some spares? And they're like, well, we didn't want to get greedy. It's like, no, you ask for as much as you need and then ask for spares on top of that. And then we'll pack a few away even on top of that, just to make sure that they're covered. The big orders came in through actually my startup network. The Legacy was able to connect through Portland State University through Juan Barraza, who's been a great partner to us. And some of the other big orders are coming in through another partner organization in New York called Makers for COVID-19. Just to give you a sense of our partnerships, we were able to, we've been primarily in these later days serving Navajo Nation and other native groups. So when we first started serving Navajo Nation, we sent 3,000 pieces with partners to Arizona. And the question came up is like, well, if we can serve Navajo, why can't we serve our Pacific Northwest tribes and communities? And we were like, well, we just don't have a connection. So we partnered with a group called ACES, which is an engineering society for indigenous tribes. And Connor had partnered with a group in the Seattle area, which had switched from 3D printing to injection molding. And we came together to supply 500 pieces to 46 Idaho, Oregon, and Washington health centers for the tribes. So 23,000 pieces went out to these tribes in the Northwest through these partnerships. And I mean, that's just by seeing, how organized we were and, how we were focused on getting things done, I think we were able to, make these partnerships happen.
Yeah, I think because I am one of the co-founders of Enable, when the pandemic first started and people saw that makers were 3D printing PPE, they just automatically assumed that was Enable doing that, or at least my friends and family did, and people who have been part of Enable. So when people would message me, I was sending them to you guys, and then I was also sending them to Eric Bubar and Enable DC, trying to split the need between you two. I think for the first 3 or 4 weeks of, this pandemic is really serious. I had people who, like my daughter, for example, was working as a clerk at the grocery store, and people were worried about the medical professionals, but they were also starting to realize that, our essential workers, the 20-year-olds, that are working at the gas stations, all the places that couldn't close down because we needed them, we're going to need PPE. So I was getting requests for, I just need one for my daughter. I need one for my sister-in-law. She works here or there. So I did a couple of stories on the Enable website and kind of tried to blast it out to you guys, and hopefully you were able to help whoever was coming to you for that. As being in Enable, I know for a fact that being one of the makers of 3D printed hands impacts the volunteers. Do you have any stories from your makers and what their experience has been? Has it been like a full-time volunteer job for some of them? What are they feeling and doing right now?
Yeah, I could talk about some of our makers. We had let's say two types of makers. We had the ones that were helping us build the systems and the types that were actually building the PPE. So Nick DeVore, who's actually one of the attendees here, I just smiling when I saw him. He was one of our earliest makers that he had some 3D printers. He saw what we were doing. He got involved right away, and then he eventually, in addition to making PPE, joined us to help organize our volunteers. And when he has 3 young kids under the age of 4, and he's still doing this amazing work. And then when we were putting together the shipping aspect of MakerForce, no one ever really thinks about how do you deliver this kind of PPE out there. Well, we have an intake system where to organize orders. We have a production system to distribute across 350 makers with 600 3D printers. Then how do you ship them? Well, we have a fulfillment system also. So orders come in, we have a system to track them, QA them. That's one guy who created this entire system and has been executing it for thousands of pieces of PPE. And he was making PPE. I knew him because he was the only other person using 3mm filament besides me in this thing. So I had it all hoarded at my house, and we would, grouse about, oh my God, are we dinosaurs or something, using 3mm. But we made a whole lot of PPE with 3mm, I will say. And then it turns out he's an executive in the tech industry, and he knows how to set up these types of systems. So he's able to bring the best parts of himself and set that up with us. We've had other makers that joined us. There was one
Shashi, give him a shout out.
What's that?
Give him a shout out.
Give a shout out to Don Hansen. Yeah. Don Hansen is our fulfillment czar, and Mark Gibbs, who is the head of Brainwave PC, he's running our drop sites. So he made his retail stores available for us to do fulfillment. Amazing people that are doing this, that come in and they bring in little pieces that may not seem important, but bring together a whole that removes friction from the entire system.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces, and that actually ties into a question we have from the audience here, which I'll just throw in if you don't mind. One of our attendees says, "Thank you for your work. This is so interesting. How do you do the distribution?" So you've mentioned some shipping that you do. Does everything get shipped out, or do you have some people coming to pick things up? How have you handled getting these PPE orders out to the people that need them?
That's a fantastic question. So as I mentioned, we have a pop-up supply chain. So we have order tracking from inception of the order to production to fulfillment. And depending on if the group is local, and we started hyper local, can we help in the Portland area, then the metro area, then all of Oregon and Washington. Anyone who's willing to drive up and receive their order, they can pick it up from from Brainwave computers, or we actually have a physical location that was donated to us that we just call HQ. It's literally 3 doors down from one of the drop sites at Brainwave computers, so they can come to HQ and see how things are fulfilled. So mostly we've shifted to a shipping model because it's quite labor intensive, believe it or not, to have people come pick up the parts, because we have to have a place that's open all the time, and we have to match and make sure that they're getting the right parts and so on and so forth. And Connor introduced us to Go-Shippo, or Shippo, which is a way of making shipping labels easily and quickly, and that streamlined our process quite a bit. But we have a person managing the orders from assembly, shipment, or delivery, and then on the back end, our account managers come back and to make sure that the recipient is happy.
That Techoshipo system is really nice for stuff like what we're doing, because most people who have shipped something before, they they go to the post office, they say, I've got a box, this is the address, this is where it's going, they weigh it, you pay it, and it's a whole process, right? Which is fine if you're only shipping one or two things, but when you're shipping multiples a day like we were, that's hard and it becomes quite a hassle, especially when you're trying to social distance. You don't want to have to go to a place to do that. So what Goshipo does is it actually just takes there's whatever system you're using. So like we were using Airtable, and we can just directly output from Airtable into GoShippo. It does it automatically every time a new order comes in. And then you just hit print, and it prints out your 40 or whatever labels you need, slap them on, and you're done. So it made that whole fulfillment process way, way easier. It made something where it would have taken you hours to just a couple minutes. And it made it a lot easier for Don because he was already overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Right.
Imagine that 2,000 pieces of PPE that we just shipped. It took 16 boxes to ship in of all various sizes. And yeah, we were able to do that, get that all together once we had all the pieces in about a day and a half.
Cool. So some of this stuff that you're making, face shields, ear saver straps, things like that, pretty straightforward. But then you get into things like, Connor, you were talking about making masks, which can, there's a lot more involved in that. Like you said, it needs to have the right fit, needs to have the right filter. There's a lot of considerations that go into that. How have you handled validation and testing when you get into some of those more advanced types of PPE?
So for a lot of the more advanced types of PPE, we always try to run them through medical professionals first. So, the face shields, the masks, all that kind of stuff, we'd send out to the various people that we had contact with at different hospitals, get them samples, get their feedback. A lot of them, sometimes they say like, absolutely not, don't use this one, or yeah, this could work for this. The other thing as well that also helped kind of buffer us from saying this is the one to use is by having that catalog. We've got these designs, this is where they come from, this is who they're designed, this is who they're verified by, and you get to pick which one you want and if that will work for you. And you just tell us to make it and we'll make it. So it's not so much us backing that design as it is like, here's all the information you need. We're not medical professionals, but you are. So let us know what we can do and how to help you.
Let me give you a quick example of that. So when doctors' offices, dentist offices were opening back up, we had dentists reaching out saying that they needed PPE, but we found out very quickly that their loupes and their magnifying glasses wouldn't fit behind the Prusa RC3 design. So we had 3 dentists come in and with their equipment on, and we took measurements. We sat down with them and worked back and forth and came up with a design that would allow them to clip their loop on the top and while still balancing and not having it fall forward onto their face. And that was like 2 or 3 iterations. And then once they were happy, we put their names, if they would allow, or the name of their practice as the person or the group that approved of those. And that was usually enough for for the people who were ordering. In other cases, they wanted to see like a government body or another research hospital, such as Oregon Health and Sciences University, for example. But there was always a validation step, because if we didn't do that, we didn't put that in the catalog.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, now that it's been about 6 months into this pandemic, has the need slowed or changed, or are people asking for different things or replacements, or how is that going?
So the need was definitely weird. I personally only expected to go on for 2 weeks. It's weird that hit the US and it's not gonna be that problem for that long. We'll spin up and they'll get it in a few weeks, we'll be fine. And it just drug on for months. It just kept going. And kind of the bringing up the dentists, when this all first started, a lot of the dentists donated all the PPE they had because there was a shortage, and they were closed, so they donated those to healthcare professionals. But then months later, there's still a shortage, and they can't get PPE when they're trying to slowly reopen. So that's one of the reasons we reached out to them and started helping out. And that, I think, no one really expected it to be that drawn out. So it was something where it changed to kind of a sprint to a long haul.
Yeah. And to build on that, the demand is there, but it's shifting towards communities that are ever increasingly underserved. Our last few orders are going to be going to Navajo Nation, for example. We noticed in the past month or so that the pace of orders was slowing down, and that the size was also slowing down as well. So presumably the supply chain is caught up, and that's one of the core foundations of MakerForce, is that we're an emergency organization, by makers and manufacturers to supply equipment in the middle of a pandemic or another emergency. And so what we've decided is, we're going to slow down, and we're going to pause production for wave one of the pandemic, and then give our largely to give our makers a rest, but also so that we can slow down and document our processes and get ready for the next wave. We haven't shut down any of our ordering systems, so if PPE is needed, we know how to spin it up and get it going again. If we start seeing that trend spike upwards, we can reactivate our network, and they'll be refreshed and ready to go next time. So we're hoping we're not needed, knock on wood, but if we are, then we know how to spin up really quickly.
As far as reorders go and parts for this, the really nice thing about most of our designs is that they're meant to be reusable. So where some hospitals would have a single-use face shield that they have to go through so many hundreds a day, with the ones we made, they just have to sterilize them, and then they get reused over and over and over. And it's something where you send out 500 to whatever hospital, and they will have 500 for months, which is incredible. So that innovation was kind of interesting to see. That's not something that most hospitals or any medical discipline do. Almost everything's single use. So seeing the innovation on that front was also really cool to see happen.
Yeah, that's really awesome. As of today, how many volunteers do you have, and how much PPE have you made?
All right, so I'm going to look into our volunteer roster, and I will give you an exact number. So we have on record 450 volunteers, and that spans 3D printers, that spans sewers, laser cutters, and general volunteers. We estimated there was some 350 people 3D printing, more than 600 3D printers. And in sum total, we've produced or been responsible for about 66,000 pieces of PPE.
Wow.
And when I say that we're an emergency response organization for makers and manufacturers, that includes not only the 3D printed part, but those who've also gone to more mass manufacturing techniques as well, because we realize that we're this bridge, to the supply chain. So about 30,000 pieces we 3D printed, 3,000 masks, and that's going to, the 3D printed parts are actually face shields, and there's going to be a little bit more once we ship this final order. 10,000 pieces of single-use face shields were made by Boston Scientific and donated to our group, and then we've distributed them to those who are in the most severe need. Most of those have been going to Navajo Nation now. And then again, through partnership, we got those 23,000 reusable shields via our partner, Northwest. Connor, can we talk about who they are?
Yeah, we should be good too.
You got the name, and we can give a shout out to them too.
Yes. It was a Facebook group I connected to. One of our volunteers.
The Washington Face Shield Hub, I think it is.
Yeah, Washington Face Shield Hub. They're a group based out of the Seattle area, and a lot of their members have, roots in tech. So they were able to reach out to some of the companies in that area and get help. So like one of the big ones they were able to reach out to was Amazon and take advantage of the Amazon supply chain. And, that's been incredible. And I think even now you can go buy those face shields from Amazon, and Amazon's selling them at cost. They're not a profit, nothing like that. And they're using the full supply chain that they have. They're injection molded, die cut. They're using their same elastic suppliers. So that was really cool to see, because you get something that's really high quality. It was fully NIH approved. I talked to some of the engineers behind that, and they're just they're incredible people. I'm super glad I was able to meet them. So seeing like people like that come out of the woodwork was just, it's so cool.
Yeah, that's another thing I find really nice about this is that you guys, it sounds like you were able to rapidly spin up this organization and the whole infrastructure behind it, the supply chain management workflow, and other companies that maybe had a surplus of some PPE or had the ability to produce it. It sounds like they were able to leverage your infrastructure then and leverage your distribution capabilities to get that into the hands of the people that needed it, which is another really interesting side effect of the organization you built.
Thank you.
Yeah. I did see on your Facebook page, Shashi, that you guys, now that the PPE demand has slowed a little bit, I saw some photos of some of your makers holding giant 3D printed brains. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that goes to that earlier question you said about what are the interesting things we're making. So despite all of the things that are happening during the pandemic, teachers are still teaching, and we're partnered in the Portland 3D printing lab with a group called Northwest Noggin, and in non-pandemic times, they were teaching kids neuroscience by making them touch actual brains, like squishy brains. So when I got involved with them, I thought what they were doing was cool, but I didn't want to have anything to do with touching brains. So I was like, I can make MRI scans and we can 3D print them for you. How about that? And it turns out they really love that. So this group is doing outreach to the Siletz tribe here in the Portland area, and they're helping tribal teachers teach neuroscience in a culturally sensitive way. But they needed models for brains, so they needed some 20 of them. And what we learned is that these prints are hideously complex because they're taking MRI data and then stacking them back up. And then it took, these were like 48-hour prints. So quickly, some of our makers figured out how to do that in half the time by slicing the brain in half and then rejoining it. And we were making these models that were going to teachers that now when they say, this particular thing happens in this part of the brain, they can actually point to it, and the students, when they return to school, can actually hold and touch that model. So we put out the call that we needed this in the middle of us doing PPE printing, and we just said we have the filament here. If you can do it, and they rose to the occasion again. I mean, imagine there are people who have already run 12 kilograms of filament through their printers making PPE, picking up another 7 to do brains, just so that these kids have disadvantage and that they can get access to neuroscience, this technology that they would otherwise not have. So I'm really proud of that. Really proud of the group for being able to do that. We delivered those brains, 22 actually, because 2 extra done in rainbow filament, just because we could. And that again was Nick DeVore who did that, and Kyle Kirsch who did so many of those brains. It's so cool. But those are the kinds of projects that we get involved with in the community.
Nice.
That's awesome.
So what do you see for this group MakerForce going forward? Obviously, you'll continue to meet the need for PPE. Let's hope that dies down and that the supply chains do catch up. What do you see happening then? Do you think you'll branch out into other areas? What are your plans for the group longer term?
I can say in the short term, Connor and I have filed to make this a 501c3 nonprofit. That thankfully has gone in and been filed with the government. And once that happens, we'll be able to engage more corporations and get more volunteering done. We've talked about 3 or 4 different things that we could do here. First of all, is strengthen the supply chain and the system that we've built and connect it to the response organizations, with local governments here in the Pacific Northwest. So if this is ever needed again, whether it be pandemic, whether it be earthquake or other type of natural disaster response, or even wildfires. I mean, there's wildfires here on top of the pandemic that we are able to assist in some way. it's certainly teaching others how this, how to do this and build their communities and build these pop-up supply chains is important as well. And Connor, maybe if you'd like to talk about the R&D portion and creating new things, that would be really cool.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is, taking the resources that we have and the knowledge we have from, printing on masks like this and creating designs that can help people that are, optimized for 3D printing. Because no matter what college you go to, no one's really going to teach you how to design for FDM 3D printing. It takes a hobbyist to do that. And once you have the right kind of geometry, it's really, really easy to print. You can run thousands of them through a printer without any issues. So finding needs and finding places that a standard FDM printer can help, and then making those designs available to the public just open up so many opportunities. And I think that's something that we definitely learned during the pandemic and want to continue working on in the future. Create those open source designs. One of the things I don't think Shashi hit on is that I and a few other people have been thinking about taking MakerForce and kind of acting as like a manufacturer for nonprofits and for other projects. Yeah. So, say there's a project that creates a small hydroelectric generator, right? And they don't have the funding to injection mold it or do the standard mass manufacturing techniques, but they can reach out to us and we can 3D print them. We can 3D print them much cheaper, and they can have access to a full mass manufacturing without the startup cost. So we should be able to help out a lot of really incredible movements and nonprofits through that, because we have the experience now.
Nice. Well, we're about out of time here, but it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate both of you, Shashi and Connor, joining us. It's been really a pleasure to have you. For the folks listening that want to learn more or get involved, where can they go to find more about MakerForce?
It's very simple. If you're interested in finding out about MakerForce, if you're interested in volunteering, especially if you need PPE, you can go to makerforce.org. That's our landing page, and you can find information there. You can also join us on the MakerForce Facebook group and page and reach out to us as well. And we're MakerForce pretty much on every social media channel too.
Excellent. And as always, I want to invite our audience to visit our site at 3duniverse.org. Just click on the 3D Universe Untethered image in the upper left, and that'll take you to a page where you can see the recordings of past episodes as well as register for upcoming episodes. We've got a lot of other great episodes planned, so check back often to join us for those. Again, thanks guys for joining us. It's been a lot of fun.
That's good.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.